Hello, listeners of the Let's Talk About Autism in Monglish podcast. Welcome back to season three. I was just telling my guest that I really didn't know if season three was going to happen because, one, life, and then two, well, I honestly was kind of running out of ideas, and as I'm talking to, friends I've met through the group and just everyday, conversations, I was like, I feel like I've covered everything. I mean, this last summer, and I was just telling my guys, I said, the universe provides because I had so many amazing people reach out and say, I want to share this. I want to talk about this. And hey, I listened to your episode and I want to expand more. And I'm like, you do? Let's do it. So one of those guests is with me today. And her name is Nari Tao from I'll let you share more about yourself, but I just and I can't remember which podcast episode you mentioned, but for me as a behavior analyst, as a professional talking about, what I do, it's always so nice to have other Hmong professionals reach out to me and say, hey, I see what you're doing. Let's collaborate. And that's where we kind of chatted. And I was like, yes, it's so nice to feel like, well, no matter what big job individual passion projects are, like we intertwine at some point. And I have just loved seeing the love and support from Tantal Guyam Hmong sisters from everywhere who have reached out. I'm like, where have you guys been? Like all my life, really. And no matter what, it's on all at Beijing Gila, and I'm just so glad to have met everyone and just continue. Um, I think we all kind of bring our own passion projects to the table, but realizing that alone we cannot accomplish this. It's a big task to take on. And so just feeling grateful that you reached out to me, Nari. Thank you so much for agreeing to come on my show. Everybody, this is Nari Tal. Welcome to the podcast.
Hi, Tia. Thank you for having me here. I'm super excited to be a part of your journey here, and maybe just kind of share my experiences in terms of just what it's been like being in my field of work and also parenting two children of needs as well. Um, so I'm excited. I have been working in the mental health field for the last 12 years. I have my licensed professional counselor um, in the state of Wisconsin. I graduated from Marquette University back in 2012. So it just feels like it's been like
Yeah.
many moons ago since I like graduated. So since then, I've been really dedicated and committed to working in the field of mental health, just working in various community roles such as like case management, in-home based psychotherapy services, family counseling. I spent like a whole decade working in crisis intervention
Hmm.
services, and currently I'm working in an outpatient mental health clinic. I'm actually working with Allegheny County right now as a clinical therapist as my day job. And then I actually just opened up my own private practice as well. It's
Yay.
called Untangle Minds, and it is to be able to provide accessibility for accounting services across the state of Wisconsin via online services. And I will actually also be offering in person counseling services soon in the Fox Cities area. So I'm super excited for that to be able to open my office. Um, so I haven't shared with anyone. So this is the first time me
Oh,
sharing it. So
yay.
I'm really excited. Um, but yeah, otherwise, like I've mentioned, I am a mother of three boys,
Hmm.
and two of which are diagnosed with autism spectrum disorder um, with very different severity
Hmm.
in terms of my different experiences with both of them. So my oldest, he's 12, and he is diagnosed with autism. He was diagnosed back when he was like 5. I believe that was when we actually went through like the whole neuropsychological evaluation that took several, you know, uh, dates for us to go in, did an evaluation. They gave us recommendation. They kind of evaluated, assessed kind of where he was at cognitively, developmentally, emotionally, and whatnot. So that was when we first got him diagnosed. But even before then, he was already in birth to three services.
Mm-hmm.
And that was how we kind of transitioned him into um, getting him more services with the Children's Long-Term Waiver Program through the county.
Mm-hmm.
And then we got him formally diagnosed at that time. And then with my youngest, he's 3, and he was diagnosed last year. So last year I actually took a mental health break from
Mm-hmm.
my career to really focus on his needs and where he could thrive in terms of like just working with like his treatment providers and working on like specific goals that could help him with. He is non-speaking, so that's been our challenge. A very different experience with both these children in terms of
Mm-hmm.
just like the different stages, the different needs that they're experiencing and going through. You think that you got it the first time around, but
Yeah.
then it doesn't work like that. Um,
Right.
but I think that what's helpful for me, like I have the privilege of having that, professional and educational background, right? Understanding that, hey, my son's not talking, or maybe he's not really meeting some of the developmental milestones that he is. And that was when I knew immediately, okay, we need to get him assessed, or we need some referrals, we need something, to kind of
Mm-hmm.
help support us. When I had my first son, we actually were living away from family,
Mm-hmm.
and we were also living away from the home community
Mm-hmm.
at that time. So imagine having to navigate, having a child with special needs and trying to figure out like how to balance, everyone's needs, understanding what he's going through, with no support, right? So that was kind of
Right.
the chapter that I was going through at that time, with just like um, trying to figure out what I can do to help my child to advocate for his needs. And because I have the background knowledge and education in mental health, and I had specialized working with children, adolescents, and families when I was um, in my graduate program.
Mm-hmm.
And I did a lot of internships, working with young kids as well with special needs and just some neurodivergent disorders as well. So I was familiar with just kind of the ropes of getting my son help.
Mm-hmm.
But if I didn't, I don't think that I would have sought the help myself.
Right.
So I definitely did have that privilege to be able to like get the help that I needed to get my son the help that he needed to like navigate um, just his daily living activities and school.
Yeah. So I I was just thinking like, I love everything you're sharing and it's great. But I was thinking, oh my gosh, big y'all, Hmong listeners, y'all. I was just thinking today, like, how do I want to change this season? And I was like, I'm going to challenge myself to speak Hmong more. And then also at the same time, though, I'll be really transparent. I've asked like we've done non Hmong speaking colleagues and friends to kind of like do some QA for me. Like, if you listen to my podcast, and even though you don't know Hmong, are you still getting the message, right? And so I think what you just shared too about how your privilege with your graduate experience let you know, like, okay, these are the things I'm looking for. I'm not seeing it. What's the next step? Especially, this podcast, I hope that will reach also y'all, Hello Mongsu, right? Because I think that what happens when you don't 유튜버니까, right? 유튜버니까 좀 theo you in your bong you chụp biết too, right? I hear those stories a lot too, and it's really heartbreaking because I just wonder, can you imagine like we being in the field, we know, right? Like we know kind of like a starting point. And if we don't, we have the resources too, right? We have a network. You can ask that colleague, you can ask someone, and they can direct you there. You're as a parent, you're still having to do the heavy lifting, the legwork to go find out. But yeah, you don't know where to start. And I just want to make sure that I remind myself, to inject hormone in here. I worry, right? Just as the producer of the show, I'm like, oh my gosh, so
Mhm.
constantly I'm like, how do I make it relevant? So,
Abs
Nari, you were talking about how, thầu các từng tu lo, như first
mhm,
time parent, các the sức thay you
mhm,
các chị bảo các chị mua khó experience em cái cho development cái nữa lo thì bây giờ it would have been harder, right?
mhm,
có các chị bảo thì thầu nữ chị你只係咯，只聽你只你個係你俾你只聽得個，要做晒個一陣，同你應該拉面住嚟，同再做你嚟，你仲只啲嚟，同係你俾即係做個藥嘅，他冇 right。但是咁我考 experience 一個包嘅有 science 個要晒 for 一嚟去，so 比較你嘅自己，I think 比較忙 right so yeah, kind of. You guys were raising him away from the Hmong community, so you kind of didn't have that influence. But I think even yeah, you raise you to, traditionally, you go, around you go, right, aunts and uncles. I feel like in the Hmong community, in the Hmong culture, more have a feeling of like bây tư môi mình nhỏ bỏ từ lo lời bây giờ bỏ từ mình nhỏ bây giờ bỏ
yeah,
đâu ya你怎么来讲只做错你要有保持你要有老师但是 the more good families tana the more for me as the home sister and then it's a professional in the field go sad there maybe told all them 就老係人對 you do 幫 share 添未 share 了 right you did tell it you learn to hiding the learn hiding the to kind of you could use a tight you that she at the same time I feel like it's like the blind leading the blind because it's like
right,
well are we truly addressing what's happening here right because maybe calm that mentality it worked for maybe a long time ago actually no the biggest platform or soapbox that I stand on is that early intervention and early intervention yeah the good mean between 18 months to the young you go boy then it won't got it on the guy you move your thumb and here's the thing about early intervention cái gì nè thế chỉ có yếu chỉ từ mù hay cho cái thumb kind of hay to le kind of yeah thế hình gì cái cú chơi cho cú tụi mình họ cú yên nè cú yên bỏ hay tiền nữ bông cá le nữ whether you get the first minyo or even your second or third like cái you mu advocate mu hai lu do for cái tụi mình to even the thumb and I'm about to go down a rabbit hole because I'm about to say, "就好头个莫名啊，一个就你被喜欢的 pediatrician." I think mong被被真咗 a 就我好哩 a 嘢對心毛 right，被的你個心毛啦，你已經包用差別啦，你已經夠啦，已經包啦，但是嗰下被實在女孩子啊，yes，你包考個對面頭你冇冇，聽人of course，你有冇 training，但是有個係啲 autism。all of autism, the here called diagnosis of autism, it's still young. Maybe you call both for like the likes, maybe Dr. Hyung right? And so that's still a very young diagnosis. And so the tamo specifically autism, it look at pediatrics, like a
mhm,
common right? In general, there's a lot of autism. So you got that she can move got the pediatrician and said, "Shit, a lot check on her," and it's just hate the you don't let's wait 3 more months, let's wait until they're 15 months, 18 months, and I got the 18 months right, and then the problem there or the situation you might run into there is getting your child in to get a diagnosis or even to be seen, to be evaluated, right? And so from 18 months to 北洋的, it's such it's a race. You're racing against time to make sure that you can get in the right doors to the right person to help with the Actually, channel to back up
Mhm.
is you, right? So anyway, I just want to bring that up that, bây giờ nhiệt hết gì món gì họ chỉ hay luôn make out or YouTube tao cho cái yung mu mu talk if I don't it can be hard, but Nari, let's be honest, it's hard for individuals like you and myself, right? Who are in the field,
Yeah.
like enmeshed in the field. Because before you can be ready to seek support for your child, you as a parent have to be ready. So, did you experience any of that with your kiddos being already, in the mental health field and knowing all these signs? Like, did you go through your own personal journey of like, we talk about like the stages of grief, right? Where you're like, no, or the denial, and then the maybe the anger, the bargaining,
Yeah.
and then maybe
Mhm.
landing at acceptance and then going back to denial. Like, did you experience any of that?
Mhm. Oh, yeah, for sure. And I can say personally and professionally, it doesn't really stop, right?
Yeah.
Because you will, um, there's a terminology called oscillate, right? You'll go back and forth, right?
Mhm.
You'll go back and forth with like learning how to um, work through all these different emotions that you're going to experience and kind of come along the way. There's going to be days that's going to be really hard, right? Where you almost feel like you just want to give up, go
Mhm.
hide and, um, don't have to like deal with any of these, responsibilities anymore, right?
Mhm.
Because there are days that are like that, or there are days when you do have some good days, where it's
Yeah.
just like, oh gosh, like you know, um, you take your eyes away for a minute only and you shy you think minyo tung lo, then it's a high luna, right? And
Mhm.
then like you think about like uh Cậu xong có xong thâu lo you tụi mình tới tốt cho hai luôn ấy, right? And you
Mhm.
were worried that lo chỉ tốt cho hai luôn and then thở cho hai luôn nó chỉ là touch nó lo hai luôn tao thâu thế and then you don't know how to help them filter it out now,
Yeah.
right? Now
Yeah.
you're kind of in that stage now, right? So it just feels like every stage is a stage to learn and to foster more growth and development as a parent and even as partners as well. I think that when you are when you have children with special needs, it plays a lot of role in your marriage as well. How do you
Mhm.
also communicate with your partner, um, and how do you guys kind of co-parent together, in order to kind of have the same language for your child, and that will also be a learning curve as well when you have children who's on the spectrum. So that's what I've learned over the years is that, yes, there's going to be um, a lot of, you know, grief and some anxiety, a lot of worries that's going to come along the way. There's going to be a lot of things that you're going to kind of discover about yourself in terms of even just like your tolerance for patience, right? You can be the most patient person on earth, right? And then when you have
Mhm.
a child with special needs, it's like it's completely out the door, right?
Mhm.
It's like you're a completely different person in front of your child. But what I've learned is I've learned how to validate just my own feelings and just kind of my own emotions, and for me to affirm that it's okay for me to feel this way, and there's good and bad days, right?
Mhm.
I'm going to hold on to those good days, and the bad days are more of like those learning experience, right? Like what can we do differently, or how can we manage the situation differently so that we have lesser of those days. So it's definitely a self discovery, with like growth and growing along with your kids. You really don't just stop. When I was in grad school and when I was like, okay, what do I want to be when I grow up, right?
Mhm.
And I think one of the questions that you originally asked me was like, what brought me into the mental health field?
Yes.
Um, I personally struggle a lot with like just growing up and just living in this like bicultural reality that we're in, right?
Mhm.
A lot of different expectations, different values, different cultures, and traditions happening at home. And then you go to school and you talk to your white peers, right?
Mhm.
And it's such a different culture out there, right? Um, and you're having different conversations, with them. You come home and there's like you're an adult at home, and then when you go to school, it's like you're a child. So I think
Yeah.
that I struggle a lot with just like self-esteem and puberty,
Mhm.
understanding my sense of self and my sense of identity. And when I was kind of navigating through that, I'm like, gosh, like I have no one to really like look up to help
Yeah.
guide me to kind of like shed some light and to kind of hold my hand, right? I mean, sure, I can talk to my mom or my dad, right? But it's not it's not really the type of advice, that you would
Right.
want to reach out to because they can't really relate to you because their generation comes from a more older traditional way of thinking and doing things. So it makes it hard for myself, growing up and just not really knowing where to navigate. It's kind of like you're kind of lost in that like compass and you don't really know which direction to go to, right? And so that was kind of where what kind of led me to the mental health field.
Mhm.
And not only that, but I was always very like I've always been like a very observant person. And so I've always wanted to like learn about like languages, about like the
Mhm.
human development, how we behave, right? So I always observed like a lot of people at school, my teachers, so that always intrigued me. And I wanted to kind of learn more about that. So um all of a sudden I just kind of landed into kind of like the mental health field
Mhm.
when I was like, okay, I think I'm going into this field now.
Yeah.
Um, I also was working with kids with special needs at that time as well when I just first started kind of like dabbing more into like the mental health field. And I'm like, oh, I really enjoy working with like children with disability, with special needs. Like, I mean, a lot of the individuals that I work with were diagnosed like ADHD, Tourette syndrome, autism, um, oppositional defiant disorder and all of that.
Mhm.
But I really wanted to work with that specific population because I
Mhm.
felt like, when you talked about early prevention, right? That was what I wanted to
Mhm.
be a part of, to be a part of that like early intervention. And so I'm like, oh, I really like this. I could be, a great source of guidance and resource, for this group of population. And not only that, but for also our group of Hmong youth as well, right?
Mhm.
Because it's so much needed, and we don't have enough resources out there. There's such a discrepancy in terms of resources available for our Hmong youth, especially if they're dealing with their own mental health or
Yeah.
disability or special needs, and there's really not a whole lot that they can reach out to. Um, and so I study in that. I specialize in that in children and adolescents that I
Mhm.
mentioned to you. Um, and then as soon as I graduated out of my graduate program, right, the first job that I got was working with adults
Uh-huh.
that suffer from like, severe mental illness. I did case management for a couple years. And and then I fell in love with working with that population as well. I'm like, oh,
Mhm.
this is such a so much easier job as well. I mean, it's not easier, but there's definitely different language, different terminology, different ways of navigating different interventions for these type of groups, right? Um, and so when I had my first son,
Mhm.
I realized that he had a speech delay, and that was my first indicator that he wasn't speaking yet when he was supposed to be kind of like putting words together or maybe saying one word or two words here. And so that was when I first got him kind of like into birth to three. At
Mhm.
that time, I wasn't like really thinking that, oh, he could be on the autism, spectrum or not. Um, and so a couple years later, when we decided to get him the neuro psych evaluation done, then he was formally diagnosed with autism. There definitely was a lot of like days where I struggled with just some of the behavioral, you know, dysregulation, right, that happen at home with like self-injurious behaviors, a
Mhm.
lot of self-harming behaviors. What was what I struggled the most with, and just not having the right tools at that time to kind of like help him to navigate through regulating his emotions. Um, and so they're definitely at the beginning stages when I, was kind of navigating through that as a parent, as a new parent too, because I didn't have my two younger kids yet at that time.
Mhm.
So, um, there definitely were thoughts of like, did I deserve this? Do I feel like a fit enough parent, to parent my child with special needs? Those type of like thoughts do come up with also thinking of like maybe having some guilt feelings as well. Maybe also thinking that, oh, 對上冠專窗冇可能有面有a that has special needs or disabilities, and now it's almost like now I'm punished with this, right? Like you
Mhm.
start having some of those darker thoughts, right?
Yeah.
Of like thinking that maybe I asked for it and now I have that. So I definitely went through that stage of
Mhm.
thinking that, maybe I asked for it, maybe that I was so passionate about wanting to work with this population, and now I'm gifted with a child that's special needs.
Mhm.
uh, so I had to kind of work through that on my own, with just like learning how to um, foster compassion, right? And I think that that's what we really don't do a lot, especially when we have so much responsibilities going on in our life, is learning how to cultivate that into how you view just kind of yourself, and learning how to manage your own emotions, and also being curious about what your child's going through. So that took a while, and I feel like I'm still going through that, especially with
Mhm.
my 3-year-old now, who's
Yeah.
also diagnosed with autism. And, with my 3-year-old, his behaviors, I say are more on the severe side, with just very dysregulated, and a lot of self-harming behaviors. And it can be all throughout the day, or
Mhm.
there's days when he might just have only like one big tantrum, and
Yeah.
then we're good.
Mhm.
Um, so we're definitely still navigating a lot more differently this time around, with my 3-year-old versus um, my firstborn, who is now 12.
Mhm.
So it's been quite a journey.
Yeah, well, thank you so much for just sharing that. I think um I was talking to another mom about how in this social media internet world, what people show you on social media sometimes it's not what's really happening out behind the scenes. And it can be tough because everyone thought, oh, there's that perfect family, but you never know what a family is going through behind those perfect pictures, and so it can make some people feel like they're not quite attaining this image that people are projecting. But then it's like, no, you guys, like that is not even real, like this conversation where we're really talking about, the things that you're really struggling with. And yeah, but that you come equipped with this education, with this knowledge to go, wait, how can I regulate myself now that I'm identifying that my child's dysregulated, right? And so, it's that really interesting and challenging dynamics with toka leave halu, right? That where you've got your you know counselor hat on, and you have an answer for everything, right? You are in charge of those sessions. But she toka log off, and you're staring at you know um, all of the behaviors, and you're trying to employ some of the strategies that would work, but for yourself it's harder. So, and we talk about compassion fatigue and burnout as a professional. But tell me about for you, like what does a compassion fatigue and burnout look like for you? Is it do you feel like it's compounded? Because no matter how good we are at twitching off and on, you carry that with you, y'all. And I would say, um, all the mental health professionals that I've ever met in my career, we are here for a reason. Whatever brought us here is also what's keeping us here because we feel like we can make a difference, in our own special gift that we have to offer. But man, sometimes it's heavy. We carry that burden because, we kind of like ease it off of the ones that we support. And we carry a little bit of it home, I know even for me, when I work with parents, when I have a day where I'm doing a lot of parent meetings, and I'm telling them, hey, today he accepted this blue cup. He didn't throw it away. He was okay. And he didn't drink the whole milk, but he took a sip. That's a step, And I know what a challenge that was. And when a parent's telling me, I'm scared, what if he don't drink milk anymore? And that's a real concern, right? But like I said, I can switch that off. That's you for you. Like, tell me what that's like. Because I think a lot of parents, try to find that healthy balance. But I love that you're like, but I tell you, maybe you're like, this is what I would tell my clients to do. So I try to give myself that same advice, and I will be the first to admit that I ABA my own husband. Use a lot of positive reinforcement. I'm like, hey, when you do this, then we can go do this. So I bet you use some of your strategies at home too, right? With yourself, with
Mhm.
your spouse, with your kiddos. But how do you find a healthy balance and creating boundaries, setting boundaries for you guys, so that you guys can also being a busy mom, finding time for that self care, right? All of those things are important, but like at the same time, you're like, how do I do it all when there are competing behaviors today? Today I came home and I was going to be that awesome mom, super mom, but this behavior, it's depending on severity, right? You're just trying to put out fires. You're just trying to, make sure everyone's safe. So a lot of questions here, but just share with me your thoughts on that.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, compassion fatigue is very common, right, in the mental health
Mm-hmm.
field, especially in the helping professionals. And I felt it numerous times throughout my career. And to add on top of that, just like the parent burnout, right, as well, that
Mm-hmm.
adds on top of that as well, as especially if
Yeah.
you have children with special needs, and there's a varying degree of that. When I was working, I remember my days when I was working in like crisis intervention, and I spent like a whole decade, working in crisis intervention. And, if no one is, if anyone's familiar with like crisis intervention, I do a lot of
Mm-hmm.
like suicide risk assessments. I'm seeing actively suicidal clients. I'm doing a lot of assessments. I'm working with law enforcement. It's like, it's chaotic, right? I mean, the crisis
Mm-hmm.
terminology already in itself, it's already pretty chaotic, right?
Yeah.
So I remember, and I worked nights as well. So that probably wasn't really helpful, in
Yeah.
terms of longevity for my mental health. You can
Yeah.
burn out really quickly. Um, and so I just remember my days being, low energy. I always had like sleep hangovers. It's like you boom and then you
Mm-hmm.
wake up and it just feels like you're a zombie.
Yeah.
And you are still responsible to take care of your kids as well, right?
Yep.
And getting their needs met. And you always just feel like you're always catching up all the time, right?
Yep.
And I remember just feeling exhausted all the time, always feeling like you're never fully rested. And
Mm-hmm.
there were days when I just didn't feel like I had the motivation to go to work. There would be times when I would just have to call out work because I knew that um, my mindset wouldn't be where it needs to be,
Mm-hmm.
to do my job well if I'm in that mindset, and you would just know, even if
Right.
you have a different thought process or a different mindset, your body will shut down on you,
Yeah.
and you will know, because then it just feels like you're kind of just stuck in your body and you're like frozen.
Mm-hmm.
that's how I felt, with just like passion fatigue and burnout. I felt it. I feel like I'm in a much better mindset now than I was before. I would say, just because I'm intentional now with
Mhm.
applying more like skills, applying more things that I can do to help myself to kind of navigate,
Mhm.
um, balancing, that work and home life type of thing. But I remember it was the worst during the pandemic because
Mhm.
I just had my baby. I just had my youngest at that time, and I was homeschooling. I was
Mhm.
working nights and taking care of newborn. And if you can just imagine
Yeah.
the sleep deprivation, right, that
Yes.
as a new parent or seasoned parent, going through, um, with not getting enough sleep, having to homeschool, working, nights and working in crisis intervention, um,
Mhm.
it's a lot,
Yeah.
and yeah, at some point I was just kind of like, I think I'm done. I need to reassess where I'm at with like
Yeah.
my priorities. I have to take care of myself. I need to take a step back. It's almost like you have to kind of like truly step out of your whole life, and like look inward to kind of see like where do you need to go and reassess where is the needs that you haven't like taken care
Mhm.
of, and learn how to kind of like redo, right? So that's what I did. Um, but then passion fatigue and burnout is really real, in terms of just like learning to find balance and finding balance for me. Um, and even now, it has to be intentional,
Mhm.
because you'll never be able to find like a happy balance, right? It'll never be like 50-50.
Right.
Because I think we live in a generation now where it's so busy. There's so many expectation externally out there, for you to meet everyone's needs and trying to also take care of yourself at the same time. So you have to be intentional in incorporating like a self-care routine, for yourself that would work out for you. So if it's you having to wake up earlier in the morning, maybe waking up like just 30 minutes earlier or something like that, so
Mhm.
you can get that cup of coffee or you can put some makeup on or
Yeah.
something like that. I mean, that's self-care routine. That's you implementing um, regimen for yourself ready to take care of yourself, right? To
Mhm.
prioritize your needs. Or it could be, if you have just a little bit of time during lunch or something like that, what I've been doing lately is I would just take like a 30-minute walk,
Mhm.
during my lunch break in order for me to just separate myself from work
Yeah.
and just kind of all the noises around me, in order for me to be able to take care of myself. And then, after work, also learning how to separate yourself, like decompressing, finding a
Mhm.
way to do that, whether if it's just you driving yourself home within that like 5-minute drive or 30-minute drive. I mean, that's you time, so you can
Mhm.
use that time however you want to. And I never like just go when I park my car in the driveway, I don't always just like go inside my house right away. I kind of
Mhm.
sit there for a little bit.
Yeah.
I'll take some deep breaths, maybe I might look at my phone very quickly, but otherwise, like, it's a moment for me to just kind of like separate myself, right? Before I enter into the unpredictability of my home.
Yeah.
So that's what I usually do. Other ways of me engaging in self care activities, just like maybe I might have some like date nights with my sisters or my family members, or I'm an avid walker. I like to walk and jog, so I'll take some time. I'll go out and
Mhm.
do some of that as well. Um, I like to journal a lot as well. That's kind of
Mhm.
my new thing. I journal a lot as another source for me to just kind of jot down all my busy, worrying thoughts down as moms are. So that's what I usually do. I think that it's really important for us to kind of like, as moms and as Hmong mothers, right?
Mhm.
Especially to incorporate self care because um, Baek Young Hong Panya has a tendency to always prioritize other people before us, right? And
Mhm.
I mean, a lot of times we're kind of taught that way
Yeah.
also, right? Like you take care of others, and you come last, and
Yeah.
if you have time for yourself, then you do. But if you don't have time for yourself, then you know you're not on that list, right?
Right.
So self care is really important, as a way to kind of like implement that to improve your mental health, right? And not only that, but your emotional health as well,
Mhm.
your social health, your physical health, all of that.
Yeah. I had brunch with Wong's sister, friend of mine recently, and she's also an LPC. And I love hearing because like behavior science is kind of different, right? Like I'm behavior analytic and your psychotherapy. And I mean it's eventually they blend a little bit, meet in some corners, but we're so like we're a lot black and white, like what we do for a job. And so I always love to hear what my LPC, LCSW counterparts feel about, this topic. And she told me something very similar along the lines of what you said about like, she's like, Tia, self care is as easy as, and she knows because I have a 2 year old and so I have a almost 9, 6, and 2 year old, and she also had a baby, and so we were kind of like commiserating, talking about, oh gosh, how do you find that balance? She said, Tia, self care is as simple as closing the door when you use the bathroom. And I was like, oh
Yeah.
my gosh, you are so right. Because how often do we just feel like "Không khí mình nhỏ ni chỉ
Mhm.
lỡ là thay là tay you thôi you tư on the toilet, right? The boundaries, setting healthy
Yeah.
boundaries. And I thought, you're so
Yeah.
right. And I was telling my husband, we need to lock on our bathroom door, because that's my self care
Yeah.
time. Or um,
Yeah.
some of us are not early risers. So I will never be a wake up 30 minutes early just to have coffee. But but I will say, being intentional and finding that
Yeah.
thing that makes sense for you. And so I think I saw a meme about like how many of us come home and sit in the garage for like a few minutes. And at first, I used to give my husband a hard time about it. I'm like, dude, I've been with the kids and I needed your help. Like I heard the garage door open. Where were you? And now I do it and I realized, like you just need a few minutes to just kind of like, you know, especially I mean, no matter what kind of job you do, right? Like that's like your work life. You come home, you want to just, whether you decompress on the way home or not, like you need just a second to, I think as human beings, we need to, you kind of be very intentional about, like just realizing what you're leaving behind and what you're walking into, and then showing up, right? And showing up for yourself, for our partners, for our kids. And again, I love that being very intentional about it because I think growing up, and I could do an entire podcast episode that has nothing to do with autism on this, but as Hmong daughters, go from
Yeah.
Benya, right?
Yeah.
Go who we, our mannerisms, our how we care for others, and there's so much good in that. I never want to make it sound like I'm not grateful for all the great gifts and lessons that we learned from our mothers. But something that we didn't learn was how to do self care, to prioritize ourselves. Even now, as a 40-year-old woman with my mother, who is my children's beloved Nitai, I don't see her even now prioritizing herself. And I had to go through my own little journey to figure out like it's okay to, right? Without piling on the mommy guilt, the mom daughter guilt, like feeling like, oh, I myself and my sister, we can't get away because yeah, growing up, I don't know if you heard this, if this was a thing that Vanilla generation would say would be like, you 먹었다 your sister suit or your poison suit and now I'm unlearning that and going, mother, I need this trip so I can be a better wife, right? So I can be a better human being. I need this time away. But I get to a point where I realize I'm not here to coach or teach you that, but I have to coach and teach myself to do that for myself, right? And
Yeah.
healing from that and unlearning all the things that we realize, as well intentioned as they were, they don't apply to the lifestyle that we all currently live, right?
Mhm. Yeah, totally. Right. Because what worked for, our moms and dads doesn't resonate, and it
Hmm.
no longer works for us, right? Because what worked from them, they went off on like survival mode, right? Like, how do
Hmm.
we survive? And this is how we're going to survive, right? Um, and we no longer really need to be in that like
Right.
survival mode anymore, right? So right now we're comfortable, we have resources, we're educated, or some most of us are, right, where we know how to reach out for supports, and we know how to take care of ourselves in ways where we can model that to our kids so that they can learn how to take care of themselves as well. um, so that they don't have to search very hard to learn how to like love themselves, learn how to set
Hmm.
boundaries, right?
Yeah.
Or learning how to take care of themselves overall. So I think that with us learning how to empower ourselves to prioritize our needs first, hopefully that will kind of lead on to like the next generation
Hmm.
so that they can also learn how to do that for themselves.
Yeah. So, Nari, you are